I'm Alex Whitten-Hanna. I'm a local lawyer. I've been a lawyer now for 50 years, and 20 years ago, or a little over 20 years ago, Genevieve Beecroft came into my office and told me that we had to save this wonderful old building that was down on Takapuna Beach. It had been sold by its developer owner Bob Green to a South Auckland house remover and for $100,000, and Genevieve had caught on to the fact that the Takapuna Council, as it then was, had made it clear that the house was not to be transported away from the North Shore if there was an alternative site on the North Shore. Well, Bob Green claimed that there was no alternative site, and that's why he sold it for $100,000 to the South Auckland fellow. In the event, with injunction proceedings in the High Court, we stopped Bob Green selling the house, and Genevieve came up with the money needed to shift it from its Takapuna beachfront position up here to Fred Thomas Drive, and the rest is really history that other people can talk about. But I think it was a pleasure and privilege for me, albeit somewhat demanding, to get that injunction proceeding away in the High Court to stop its removal, because removal was imminent.
I knew about the lake house. I went to the parties and the fundraisers and things when the house was on the beach, and then I was teaching at the time full time, and I was busy, and Genevieve rang me up and said we had a treasurer and he's gone to Christchurch and we need a treasurer, so it's you. So the first annual meeting of the lake house, which was held in the house where the roof had holes in it and it rained and the water actually came through the meeting, I became the treasurer. So the first annual meeting, so 1 year into but before that they had saved the house and they had built the foundation. So I'm not a true trooper from the very first, but I've been here since the first annual meeting. We realised that this house, because it's a domestic sized house, the rooms were not really big enough for classes that were viable. You've got to have, say, 10 pupils to make a class viable, and the rooms weren't really big enough, so we offered the barrack building, and so we fundraised various.
What did you do for fundraising? What was
initially, the lady who was here called Cathy Wildermuth, she did the gardens. She was her big thing around here, and other volunteering, and her husband was the director of Haven and Roller, and they'd been looking for a project for their, I think, 60th anniversary of the big construction firm. Their 50th anniversary, they'd done a house in Takapuna that was Frank Sargison's house, and they were looking for a project that she persuaded them to do us. So they were our major sponsors, but we still had to raise a great deal of money beyond that. But they were the sponsors by how much money have you got? We've got X amount, I think it was something like $200,000, and okay, we will do it. And there was no itemised bill, so they actually replaced the roof. They did a great deal of, they did all the foundations, they put it all on, they put it all together. They built the deck and everything, and then just said, well, that was your money spent. I'm quite sure it took a great deal more money then. So that was the way the sponsorship happened. Yes, we had some very good parties, and we had another one. Helen decided to have one as a birthday party for her car, which was a Morris Oxford. It's a very good party venue because, in fact, you couldn't break anything or hurt anything. You know, once we did it up, it got a bit precious, and you couldn't have parties anymore. But we were in our 50s, and we were, it was good fun. I can remember, Genevieve probably doesn't remember now, but she and Fiona were under the house. The fire regulations people decided that the rubbish that was under the house was a fire hazard, like, you know, what builders' rubbish is like. And she and Fiona got under the house, which is about, it's supposed to be a metre space, but it's not quite a metre, I don't think. And they were lying down, pushing the rubbish ahead of them, and Genevieve sat up and hit her head on the beam and was knocked unconscious. And Fiona's under the house with Genevieve out cold. But eventually she came around and they sort of pulled her out again and gave her a glass of water. But those are the sort of things that. And we had, I mean, when we first had the wood carvings, and I was quite involved with that, and the young wood carvers who are now sort of men with families and quite respectable, were great. A, dope smokers, and B, drinkers, and C, they slept on the floor in the house. And that was sort of endless party. It was very good fun. Oh, well, me personally, I'm proud of the barracks building because I was the chair during that time, and that was a really good addition to the house because it ends up sort of looking like outhouses to an old house, and I think it chimes in very well. But mostly proud that after 20 years it's doing exactly what our vision was 20 years ago, and I think that's it. And we've had our ups and downs, we've had our managers come and go, it hasn't always been like that. This is really good. It's really, to be in a really good space after 20 years is excellent.
Really hard to know what the most memorable story is, because there was, I mean, where we're standing right here, the builder put his leg through the floor. We were here one day and there was this dreadful scream, and this was rotten, and he was replacing damaged boards, and we came out and he was up to his thigh through the floorboard, and the lacerations really dragged his leg out.
Oh dear.
So wherever you stand in the house, there is actually something that triggers a memory. Well, at different phases of the house, I mean, there was the huge relief when we were at the council meeting that was specially convened, where they actually gave us permission, landowner consent, to move the house onto this land. The biggest problem was there was a deadline to move the house from that site, and all of the reserves and parks in the North Shore City Council, the Takapuna ward, we could only secure the house if it was moved within the Takapuna ward. It was at the beach site, and we got them, and it had a designation on it that it could only be, because it was a heritage building within the Takapuna City Council list of heritage buildings, that it could not be removed from that site unless it was moved within the Takapuna ward of North Shore City Council. And Bob Green was planning to sell it to somebody who was going to take it down to South Auckland. But Michelle Piper, who was one of the early trustees, and Julia and Tony, who were still living in the house at the stage, every time somebody came to quote on the removal job, they would tell them, are you aware that Lake House is not allowed to be included in that package? Because there were 4 other buildings on the site. There was actually 5, but one little one was demolished. And then there was 2 others that they were modern buildings, and so they were moved off, no problem. And then there was Lake House, and that was the critical one. And so they were telling all the reputable house removalists that they weren't going to be able to have Lake House to on sell as part of the contract when Bob Green was asking them to give quotes. And this sustainable removal guy obviously got through when nobody was standing guard on the gate to tell them or warn the poor guy that he wasn't going to be able to sell Lake House. And so, first of all, he was not a very well-equipped house removalist, and when he was shifting the house, he was doing it on a very tight budget, and so instead of paying to have the power lines disconnected while he was shifting the house, he tried to get through with his men just lifting it, but they caught it in Anzac Avenue and took the power out. So that was his first problem. Second problem was when he moved down here, he didn't have the right equipment to be able to get onto the boggy ground, and so that's why he dumped it all on the other side of the road. And then we had a major problem trying to get him to pay, when we put in all the remediation for the gas mitigation, trying to get him to pay 6 months later for the final shift onto the site. And he'd gone bankrupt because he'd lost the ability to on-sell the house. And so it was a great shame for him, because he had not been given the correct information when he went to make a quote for getting the job. In fact, he probably was the only person who took the job, because all the others the well-known house removalist wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. So that was, before that happened, we had to get landowner consent. We couldn't put it on somewhere like Kalani Park, which is where a lot of people said, be great beside the pump house, beside the lake, whatever. It was only called Lake House because this whole area was called the Lake Roading District. It never stood beside the house, beside the lake. It actually stood where it was on the beach, because people didn't come for the beach in the 1890s. They all came to picnic on the grass around the lake or row upon the lake and whatever. Sea bathing wasn't a big thing. So it was just a common boarding house. There was a lake hotel, but that burned down. Oh, that was Tony.
Yeah.
So Tony's going to be here next month, I gather, for the dinner. But no, Bob Green actually tried to sell the house as a piece of real estate, and he did it through a real estate agent down in Belmont, and somebody saw the advertisement, recognised it, and they wanted to find out undercover what exactly was happening and how he thought he had permission to be able to sell it, because at that stage the council had said no, you can't shift it, and so I think it was Michelle, who was a glamorous blonde, and Tony, oh no, it was a guy from, it was one of the very early, somebody or other Horner, and he was a very early member of Lake House. He was never on the trust, but he was a supporter, and he actually and Michelle went down posing as a couple with the Alfa Romeo, and went to chat to this real estate agent just to confirm that it was Lake House that he was trying to, or the coach house as it was then, that he was trying to sell, because it wasn't named, but the photograph looked so much like the coach house that it had to be, yeah.
Hi there, my name's Tony Ogle. I'm here at the 20th anniversary celebrations of Lake House, and I'll just give you a quick rundown of my association with the house. I was one of the last residents to live in, we called it back then the coach house, which was a mixed flat that overlooked Takapuna Beach, and I had the good fortune to be able to set up a studio at the house as well and basically work. So I was pretty much full-time living and working in the house. And this was in 1994 to 95. And before very long, we learned that the fate of the house was going to change from being a rental for so many years that housed so many disparate types of people over that time that there's sort of legends amongst various residents of the house that continue to be spoken of, and but it got to a point where we could see that it was going to be sold, and the land became too valuable underneath the house for the house to stay there. And I thought, how can this be? You know, the house it's a piece of Takapuna history, but when I looked deeper into it, I found out that it had a B classification, which meant that the house had to be saved, but it could be moved. So an A classification means the house can't be moved and it has to be saved. So basically it had been reclassified, downgraded to a B so that the owner could move it off and sell the land. But still I thought there's got to be some way of drawing attention to this house for people who didn't know its existence. So being an artist, I came up with the idea of having a group exhibition at the house, clear everybody out for a weekend, and basically hang artworks throughout the house because it's a big, spacious interior, and put out invitations and get a lot of the public over to see what we're talking about, and maybe get some ideas flowing about how the city could retain this historic piece of property. And you know, I wasn't sure whether anything would happen, but I had to do something. I just felt like here's an opportunity. and I was virtually doing it underneath the nose of the owner, who I think if he'd realised what my sort of overall intentions were, he probably wouldn't have allowed it, because I don't think it was in his interests for people to realise or just stop his ideas about what should happen to the land and so forth. And so I feel very proud that I was one of the instigators of change, of positive change for the house. And over the course of that weekend, many people came through, saw the show, and a lot of people started talking. And I recall contacting Genevieve Beecroft, who was on the council, and I'd heard that she was a supporter of the arts and had been involved in the salvation of the pump house. And initially she was sort of lukewarm about the idea of going into bat for another old house, but she sort of came around, and before we knew it, a whole sort of small team of other people thought the formation of a trust to see whether we could make it happen and save the house. This trust slowly came together and formed, and from there on it was a lot of work, great deal of work to get up and running and to petition the council and to get the process happening where the house could have a future in another location. So it sort of really lifts my spirits to see the house still here in 2020 and thriving as an arts facility. So I couldn't be happier.
I was going to ask that question. How do you feel about it 20 years ago?
Yeah, well, when I had the exhibition, I can remember standing up at the opening of the show and saying, look, this place will serve a fantastic purpose as an art centre, but underneath it I wasn't sure. It could have been anything, so long as it had a community purpose I would have been happy, so long as it lived on, because it just seemed wrong that this property, for all it represented, would one day not be here. So the fact that it has become an arts facility is incredible, and just seeing this sculpture symposium that's outdoors tonight, it's flourishing, and it really lifts me up to see this.
On record, the 40th birthday party I heard was a good one.
Yeah, I had a 40th birthday party here, and that was a great event. It was, I think the theme was Arty Farty Party. So basically anything to do with anything art related worked. So I got a full suit and basically splashed paint all over it. So I was a sort of, Jackson Pollock person, but there was Andy Warhol, there were Lindau paintings come to life. It was the most incredible event. Had a fantastic time. But it was always known as a party house, and that's the amazing thing that I still can't get over, is how it was sort of used and abused by generations of young people, but somehow she survived. And I mean, it's testament to the good building and the wood of these old houses. I can remember probably the most standout party we had was one of the tenants won a competition at a record store to have one of the big bands at the time, Hello Sailor, play in his venue of choice. So of course it had to be the coach house, lake house. And so no problem, we just cleared out the main room here and set up the microphones, and the boys prepared in the house next door, and come 8 o'clock it was all on. Graham Brazier and the boys were in the front room, and it was a rocking night, and everyone had a ball, and I'll never forget that. And I'll never forget the clean up in the morning as well. I think someone grabbed the fire hose from the outside off one of these uprights and took it inside and basically just washed all the cans and bottles. Like I said, the house was abused for a long time, and that's why I thought, look, it's got to stop. This place has got to be, respected for what it is. So eventually that happened. Well, I'd heard about this ghost apparition that appeared at the top of the stairs, but I don't know if she was scared of me, because I never saw her. And all I recall is one afternoon, like a lot of people like people who worked in the building next door, I think they always wondered what went on in that house. You know, there's always cars coming and going and parties and things. And one afternoon we had a courier woman arrive, and I think she was fascinated by the house as well. And she said, "Can I just come inside?" You know, she said, "I just want to feel this house. You know, I'm just not sure." And I said, "Yeah, fine." I said, "There was a ghost." She said, "Well, I'll let you know if there is anything going on in here." You know, she wanted out clean or friendly or whatever. You know, there was nothing untoward going on in that house. So it's always had that feeling of
Has
being
anybody seen the ghost?
not that I know.
Not that you know of?
Possibly late after a party one night, I don't know.